Hi, that's right, I uploaded more than one video this week. I'm unpredictable, baby. I've been bitching John Wick 1 to 3 in my off time, so I'm basically a connoisseur now. I will get around to 4, it's just not on streaming, okay? Isn't it stupid that both 1 and 2 are on Prime, and then 3 is on Netflix, and 4 is just in the Shadow Realm, apparently? Or more like on the Seven Seas, if you get what I mean. Wait, no. That was just a joke. Please, not my dog! But yeah, now that I'm sufficiently caught up in my Keanu Reeves really wanted to kick some ass again since the past 2 decades of Matrix movies have sucked expedition, I'm fully prepared to watch the first of presumably multiple spin-offs in the Jonah Wickerman universe, where everyone is an assassin apparently. Every drunk homeless guy mouthing off, that old lady who asked you to help her across the street, hell, even your local priest. Although you probably should have been avoiding him anyway. More importantly, though, I've been catching up with my Ballerina lore. It was a lot considering it dates back to the 16th century, but I figured it was necessary to really connect with this movie. Huge props to Catherine de Medici. Without her, we never would have gotten Abraham Papula ask if he can be Frank. He indeed became Frank. I thought the pacing kind of dragged on a little, though. I felt like there wasn't much character development over the 18th and 19th centuries, and it was only really until Despicable Me revitalized the dance worldwide when Pharrell Williams created Swan Lake. Truly a masterclass of our generation. At least I think that's what happened. I don't know. I stopped studying history 5 years ago. Too much is going on in the world right now that nothing from the past can be that important, right? Alright, it's finally time to talk about the movie. Ballerina from the amazing world of Gumball, or whatever the original subtitle was, stars Ana de Armas as Eve Macaroon, a Ruska Roma assassin, which, if you'll remember from John Wick, which I'm assuming you've seen, but I will still explain, are the group of ballerinas and wrestlers, I think, employed under director Angelica Houston to be trained into fully fledged hitmen, a process John Wick went through himself. Unfortunate that we never got to see beadless Keanu Reeves pirouetting on stage, but I can forgive the writers for that. Someday. We see Eve's life training as a Ruska Roma, doing her daily aim labs tracking, playing solo terrorist on training grounds. Meanwhile, her friend was slightly too slow at reloading a pistol, which is basically as bad as that one game journalist who couldn't beat the Cuphead tutorial. So she's sent to a farm upstate to live a long and happy life with Jonathan and Martha Kent. Trust me, Mouchard, her dog, also went there. This leaves Eve alone, her only token from home being a ballerina music box. Hang on a second, that's the name of the movie. It reminds her of a sister, who we assume used to be a ballerina, or she just really liked porcelain figures. I couldn't tell you. Anyway, this was given to her by her Holy shit, Diego? Yo, I live and breathe Umbrella Academy, and this is the first time I've seen any of the Hargreaves in something else since, I don't know. Good for David Castaneda, though. He deserves so much better after how the season 4 writers treated him. One day you will atone for your sins, Steve Blackman. But I can say that David gets a cool-ass fight scene that made me really appreciate his physical acting. Even if Diego wasn't my favorite Umbrella Academy character, it's Klaus. Because he's the objectively correct choice. Don't at me. His action was still some of the best, and I appreciate David's commitment to the character. Good thing season 4 didn't happen. But the first half of the movie is mostly about Eve's progression. We see the scared little girl reaching out for help, only to find Winston from Overwatch who gives her a gold doubloon to try and inspire her to be like his hero Jack Sparrow and live a life of luxury on the Seven Seas like Goro Majimbo did a few years ago at the ripe old age of 60. God, I need him. Then as the Ruska Roma program continues, Eve's morals are tested and she gets progressively deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of becoming a living weapon. At least she has agency though. It could have been like the Red Room turning her into a Black Widow that just obeyed orders. Although then she might have had the chance to become Florence Pugh, so that'd probably be worth it. I know I'd roll the dice. As a result of this, I do have to say that the action in the first half of this movie is a slight step down compared to John Wick 1 to 3. I did think that the action in John Wick 3 had a few issues with it, namely the enemies not taking advantage of John's openings, and kind of just circling him like Yakuza characters waiting to get hit with a bike. Maybe John just has the difficulty to easy, and that's why he can breeze through his fights. It'd make a lot of sense considering his bulletproof suit that only he has. I bet he's got the golden gun hidden somewhere under his floorboard, but he only breaks it out when he really needs someone dead. He could learn a lot from the Yakuza universe. Maybe he could have saved Helen if he just knew how to tiger drop her cancer cells. Despite this though, I do appreciate the lengths that the movie goes to show the differences in Eve's fighting style, especially when compared to John. There's a scene that establishes that she has shortcomings when it comes to fighting larger, stronger targets, but that in order to counter this, she plays to her strengths, changes the requirements for victory. This culminates in her using dirty tactics, improvised weapons, and often scrappy and disorientating moves, to get the upper hand. Because of this, Eve gets her shit rocked on several occasions. And yeah, John took a couple beatings every now and then, but he usually needed only 1 or 2 serious wounds before ending up on the floor without immediately getting up. I do like this though. Eve is skilled, but she's nowhere near John's level, and still finding her bearings in the underworld. That is to say, the action in the second half of this movie fucking slaps. Obviously, a movie in the John Wick world is going to have good action. That's the whole gist of the movies. That's what most people come for. I was telling my friend as we were going into the theater like 20 minutes early because we're just built like that if a John Wick movie has good action, it's pretty much an immediate 7 out of 10. The sequences for this movie are all memorable, and yes, much like how Daredevil always has a hallway fight, there is a nightclub fight. But you know what? It's one of the least memorable action scenes in this movie. And that's not me calling it bad. Oh no. That's just a testament to the fact that when this movie locks in, it locks the fuck in for some of the best melee and range fights I've seen in an action movie. And let's just say, when things get heated, I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I was finding it hard to blink. I was leaning forward in my seat having a staring contest with a Martin Scorsese in my mind doing the absolute cinema pose. I'm saying this, Martin Scorsese has probably never watched a John Wick movie and never will. Good for him anyway. I hope he enjoys rewatching Red 1 every year at Christmas. The set pieces for the action are also really cool. Of course, there's the aforementioned government-mandated John Wick nightclub scene, but every scene after just keeps getting better and better. And the final set piece is the biggest and the best. It just never stops, and it really reminded me of the opening village section of Resident Evil 4. And that is high praise, because I'm comparing this to one of the most iconic segments in gaming history. Unfortunately, Eve did not question whether her enemies went to bingo or some other communal activity, so she is still an inferior protagonist to Leon S. Kennedy. Who am I kidding? She could never replace someone so baby girl, and brave, and handsome, and muscular. Oh my god. There was one action scene that made me roll my eyes a bit though. I won't go into full detail, but it involves the best character in the movie, Frank, and a lack of understandings of how explosions work. When the last Dexter book has a more realistic portrayal of getting hit with 5 big booms from the Costco guys inches away from your face, I think you're going down the wrong route. And I hope I never have to say that again, because complimenting Dexter's dead makes me wish God smited me down for my crimes against humanity. What was Jeff Lindsay thinking? For what it's worth, it is an interesting concept for the scene though, and I appreciate where it takes place. Plus, it contains the best character in the movie, Frank, so I can't stay mad at the movie for long, but it remains a very suspend your disbelief scene. Despite this though, I can safely say that the cinematography for this movie is stellar. All of the John Wick movies have very well filmed and choreographed action, but there's one specific shot in this movie that hasn't left my brain since I saw it. I'm still questioning how the fuck they did that car scene. If you know, you know. So, our John Wick universe movie has good action and cinematography. Fork found in kitchen. What about the other stuff? Well, I can safely say that the story in this movie is pretty good. John Wick 1 has a very simple story that has been memed to death, of course, while John Wick 2 and 3 focus on elevating and expanding on that through world building and adding the rules to the underworld John throws himself back into. But Eve going on a very similar revenge quest adds some nice parallels between her character and John's, which is subtly hinted at as the movie goes on. Since I haven't mentioned it yet, this movie takes place around the same time as John Wick 3, with Eve talking to John as he's leaving the theater to go to the desert and die from cringe, because he really wants to feel like his hero Nathan Drake did in Uncharted 3. But then there's a 2-month time skip, which takes place after he crawls through the microwave known as New York City, old snake style, to reunite with his long-term, long-distance, low-commitment, casual boyfriend Morbius from The Matrix. I love math! But Eve's story is a really compelling one, sold by a great performance from Anna and the supporting cast all around. Unlike John in John Wick 1, she isn't her own entity. She's not yet completely isolated and still has the Ruska Roma director and the other ballerinas looming over her as a consequence. Her growing independence, she becomes more confident and capable in her own abilities, is very cathartic to see. And she starts to fuck shit up at the end of the movie. The worst people you know were definitely mad that Eve was going to be the new girl boss protagonist who was going to replace John Wick. And first off, that mindset sucks and I hate you. Second off, Eve definitely works in this movie as her own character and being in this universe. She's not the new John Wick, or even anywhere near his level. Everyone at Ruska Roma knows of the Baba Yaga and gawks at him, when he's walking through the halls like he's the prom queen or something. I doubt a bulletproof dress would be as practical as a bulletproof suit, however, but it is more breathable, and Keanu could pull it off. On top of the solid story, we also have some recurring themes throughout the movie that I really like. Multiple characters talk about fate and decisions, how you can leave at any point and just put your past behind you, move on, that you can confront it but need to worry about the monster it could turn you into, or face it head on and deal with the consequences. Some of these aren't exactly new to the series, but when it comes to John's decisions, they aren't exactly prominent as theming for the movies. I like it much more here where they set up the different angles and the authority figures surrounding Eve, and even have a character very similar to her who grew up in a different background, so while they have similar ideals, their loyalties lie elsewhere, leading to a classic nature versus nurture showdown, or as we call it in the psychology field, the theory of human behavior and interactionism.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Yeah, it doesn't roll off the tongue well, does it? Alongside this, the movie also touches on the indoctrination of children, whether it be in programs like Ruska Roma or into family, religion, and cults. How they treat outsiders and how they raise them to continue the cycle of hatred, turning them into spiteful members of a community of violence and savagery held together by the thin string of rules that could be cut at any point. I like the stance the movie takes comparing Eve's life to this, since she went through the Ruska Roma project, how she realizes that, yes, it is a form of indoctrination, but one that allows her to use her anger to make up for her past, to do what she could not all those years ago, and bury it once and for all. Eve isn't the only person giving a great performance, though. We've talked about David Castaneda and Angelica Houston, but Norman Reedus is also in this movie. That's right, the guy from the Hideo Kojima walking game. And I like the character he plays quite a bit. I think it's a great idea for the movie to include a character like him, and very natural for how he meets and interacts with Eve. I do wish we saw more of him though, because while he was very cool, it's hard to not think that he was a little wasted. I won't knock the movie for this though, because it makes sense to have Eve prove herself mostly alone. We also obviously see the return of both Winston and Sharon of the Continent, and I was incredibly relieved to see Lance Reddick in the flesh. I was very worried this movie was going to follow the disgusting trend these days of reviving a legacy actor with AI in some way. Star Wars popularized it, and it's been a detriment to cinema. I still wonder why the fuck Alien Romulus did it as well. That movie was great, and every time I think of Rook, it just sours my taste. Anyway, though, our Continental comrades play their roles as naturally as ever, and it's sad to think that we'll probably never see a Lance Reddick performance after this. Rest in peace to a king. I would have loved to see a Wall and Door performance. No shade to David Harewood, of course. I'm sure he thinks the same. Gabriel Byrne also plays the main villain in an honestly quite chilling performance. The cold open includes him and his commanding presence in such a cruel and believable way. The ultimatum he gives a character just feels so spiteful and evil. He's so hateable, but in an excellent way. Lastly, I'm going to venture into spoiler territory for the first time in a while. There's one positive and one negative relating to spoilers that I'd like to talk about. So you have been warned, alright? Skip to the timestamp on screen to whenever it is if you want to avoid them. Alright, 3, 2, 1. May I be frank with you? Okay, so let's get the negative out of the way. Eve's sister is an absolutely wasted and forgettable part of this movie. They bring her up in the cold open where Go Diego Go dies of cringe after Rescue Pack gives him the wrong tools. And since it forgets to bring a defibrillator and Fortnite hasn't been invented yet, it cannot revive him. Then they start panning to this woman who raises the bounty on John Stranding as soon as she's introduced, showing that she's important. Despite this, she basically realizes she's Eve's sister, shoots some guy in the head instinctively to save her, then catches up to and talks to Eve, trying to convince her that the culty family is actually good and she should allow them to keep indoctrinating children. Unfortunately, Fuse Rainbow Six Siege mistook her for the hostage and cluster charged the house, killing her, and she never gets brought up again. I really feel like this was a waste of writing and she could have been completely removed from the story and nothing would change. As much as I like the story of this movie, this part felt pretty stupid and rushed. At least Eve picked up the sword after that though. That's when shit gets real. Anyway, the good part about spoilers is everything they do with John after his reintroduction. His non-partisan stance where he just wants Eve to leave so he doesn't have to kill anyone that doesn't need to die, giving her an out because he sees himself in her and her revenge quest. The fact that he hands her ass to her on multiple occasions and only lets her get the upper hand because he isn't trying to kill her. Especially eventually giving her a 28-minute timer to complete her mission. Placing her under a constraint that forces her to learn the rules of their assassin world so she doesn't turn into a savage killer. and then having some pretty badass action that is right out of the other John Wick movies. Also, small touch, but I like that there's one guy who says, "Hey guys, are you sure we should be doing this?" I mean, it's John Wick. We stand a self aware king. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure he still died. Alright, we can stop talking about spoilers now. I only have a couple small thoughts left. I think the dark comedy in some of the scenes are pretty well done. Like when Eve is beating some assassin's head with a TV remote and is changing the channel behind her. And I was worried because a pretty prominent fight scene took place inside a hotel like the Continent. And I thought the canon was going to be broken because, John killed someone in the Continent, that's why he was decommissioned and is in this mess in the first place. But they address it in a very cool scene afterwards, and I like it. This was a really refreshing movie to talk about after The Amateur. I talked about how hyped I was for this movie, and I can safely say that it delivered. I only really had two main problems with the movie, and one of them was just one scene. That being said, there's a lot of good to be had with Ballerina. Even if you aren't a John Wick fan, I can say that you'd probably end up enjoying this one. And if you are, why the fuck haven't you watched this yet, man? God damn. I've talked for way too long though, so to finish up, I'm giving Ballerina a very well-deserved 9 out of 10. Yes, I think it's that good. Nobody really pointed it out, but I realized immediately after posting it that I definitely overrated Final Destination Bloodlines. I think it's an 8 out of 10 now. I don't quite think it hits the 9. But 1,000 people have seen that blunder already, so silly me, I guess? Either way, I'm very happy to be making content again, and I'm always watching more movies and playing more games. Here's a hint. I'm working on a Claire Obscure script right now. So stay tuned, and have a good day.